Good morning, everybody. It's Saturday, the 5th of September, and we're here in Fan for another of our artist conversations. I'm also experimenting with a bit of kit, which I hope is going to allow me to, one, look more closely at the pictures, but also the artists when they're talking. So bear with us if there's any glitches and suddenly the camera goes in a strange direction. But we're here today to talk about Wendy Earle's paintings here that are on the wall, as you can see. There's 6 of them. And also Karin Mear's pictures here next to hers, in fact. And in a second, the other part of the gallery, other than the previous conversations have been in our front part of the gallery, and now we're nearer the desk side. So it's quite nice to be in this second half of the gallery. And I've got Wendy and Karin here. And perhaps if you'd like to move closer to the work so that I can look at both of you. But Karin, you were going to ask Wendy about some of about her work. So
yes, I'm not very familiar with Wendy's work, but I have looked up her previous work, and she has done wonderful wooden structures in woodlands and very natural work. This work seems quite different, so I was going to ask Wendy, these are obviously very organic, and what has inspired you with these absolutely beautiful natural forms?
Since my husband's recent death, I haven't had the concentration and energy to carry on making big environmental pieces outside in the woodlands. And I've had to try and reinvent myself a bit, and so these are very simple ways of making pattern drawings. I fill a small tin with water, freeze it, and then grate some earth pigments, freeze it again, then turn out the frozen dish onto watercolour paper, and then just watch the movement and the patterns that are formed as the ice melts. So it's a fairly lazy way of drawing, really, but it's diverting me from my sadness, I suppose, and I'm not really a painter, a two-dimensional artist. So I see these very much as objects, I think, especially as there's so much iron and metal, gold, a metal sheet under it reflecting through. These 2 drawings come from before my husband died, and they were part of a very big story of the underwater. I've got lots of ponds where I live, and I like to swim and look at what's floating around in the reeds. But I couldn't finish the drawing, so I just cut out these 2 heads that were left.
They're full of movement, actually.
They are.
Lots of movement in them. And obviously the natural form of the water.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
inspired.
And sit beautifully between the moons, don't they? Do you call them glacial moons?
Yes.
I think you do, don't you? Yeah.
Yes, I live a mile off the road, and so where I live is very dark, and the last few nights I've been photographing the moon in the middle of the night, so I'm very aware of the moon and love looking at it.
They're also quite sort of ocular, they look like
They could,
irises.
yes, it could well be that. I like to look at things under a microscope, so they're quite possibly what you see when you're looking through at water and things living and swirling about in water, looking through a microscope.
You've discovered some amazing textures that have happened, sort of reactions with the pigments.
Yes, yes. So I've got copper pigments, I've got crushed blue glass, I've got green earth, I've got cast iron powder. So it's very much a physical reaction,
Yes.
rather than my lack of knowledge of colour. I'm not a painter.
That's the thing. Interestingly, haven't they just said that they've found some rust on the moon? Wasn't that in the news, or is it
No.
fake news? I don't think so, but maybe you were the person who knew it first.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, really, yes. So Wendy, perhaps we move on to Karen's work here.
Yes, I was, again, I very different. The two calm, sublime, coloured paintings of the eggs. And then when I first saw these, and I looked from a distance, I first of all thought they were hay ricks. It was only when I went and I could see the wheels that I realised they were tips. So, do you still live where they're coal tips?
I moved back to Aberdare from Brecon about 2.5 years ago. I was born in Aberdare, and the coal tip, I wasn't actually from a mining family. However, I grew up with these shapes around me and the coal miners coming home from work, and obviously the small narrow streets. And I actually married a coal miner when I was 19, so I had 12 years of being a coal miner's wife, which was a rather stinted role because, you know, in the late 70s, the men tended to go out to work and the woman stayed at home, which wasn't something I particularly liked. So I was, you know, and also I lived through the miners' strike in 1984. So it is really deep-rooted in me. But these actual shapes are very much influenced by a childhood experience I had of going with my mother, who was a divorcee, which was quite unusual back in the 60s, early 60s. And she and her friend took my brother and I to fly a kite on the top of a hill. And I remember that, and my mother and father had made the kite. And in our school books, which my mother still has, I had a drawing of a coal tip, that shape, with my brother and I flying a kite at the top. Now I've looked for that school book, and I couldn't find mine. However, I found my brother's.
Oh, how wonderful.
But my brother didn't put us both on the top of the tip, which wasn't particularly surprising. And he's only got one figure at the bottom, whereas my drawing, much to my mother's embarrassment, showed her and her friend, who later adopted us, lying down at the bottom of the hill together. And apparently I told the teacher that's my mother and her friend.
Okay.
So it is a little bit of a family story, and I wonder how much of this image is my memory and how much is it the family story and this image which is dictating my obsession actually with this shape. I've done lots of images of this shape. These particular ones, there's a slight narrative to them. The first one is just a coal tip with a colliery. The second one is when it's... actually, I think I might have put them in the wrong order, because this one is when it was in full force and you know, coal mining was rife and live, and then the last one is actually, there's no colliery in it, so it's actually as it would be now. But obviously they're very stylised, they're not as pointy as that, but to a child, you know, you just remember the very pointy coal tips everywhere in the valley, in Merthyr, outskirts of Aberdare. So I think it's something which I'm going to be going back to and back to, because it's very much there in my mind as a shape. And I'm sure there's some, it's a triangle is a symbol of something, but I'm not really sure what. But I think a lot of my work has featured triangles, so there's something a bit odd about it. The egg pictures are very different than any work I've done before, and they actually came out of lockdown. The first month of lockdown I found it very difficult. I just couldn't get my act together in any way at all. However, there were lots of birds in the garden, and birds that we'd never seen before, jays and lapwings, all sorts of birds. And I've always liked birds, and I like chickens, and I like nests and eggs, and I like the mother and baby connotation of nesting birds with their eggs. And I started to draw some birds. One of those has actually got a jay beneath it with its egg. However, I didn't feel it worked, and I was painting over it, and I thought actually the egg is all you need. It's a symbol of life, it's a symbol of growth, a symbol of hope, and also a calming image. So that's what inspired those two paintings. I thought the egg in itself, you don't need anything else. Eggs are wonderful, wonderful things.
Lots of people have commented on them. And yes, that sort of solitude of the egg as well.
Yes, yeah.
Closer to them. Yes, I like them. Yeah, catching. There's been lots of comments about that, which is lovely.
So they're much simpler than my usual work, and
very luminous colour.
Yes, I liked the colour combinations, and I just wanted something calm, and I actually felt quite emotional when I was painting them, and they make me feel a little bit sad.
Oh.
Yeah, although I have called them hope, because we have to have hope that things will get better, and they are getting better. Which has enabled us to be here today.
Yes, exactly.
So,
yeah. I mean, for both of you, obviously, it's, I mean, for different reasons perhaps, but it can't have been helpful for you, Wendy, to be locked down when you're very unhappy anyway. But lots of people seem the difference. Lots of artists have talked about whether they found it difficult during lockdown. Different work has come out of it for different people. For some people, equally, there's been many positives to be had from it, and you know, I guess we all hope that we can hold on to those in the future. But it's very interesting to see the range of work that's come out of this very odd time for you all, I think.
There was a strange connection with Brecon for me, because up in the cathedral, it's like a votive candle, carved candle holder out of stone. And I've been remaking casting concrete, and lighting candles for my husband. And it's something that I kept going and during the lockdown. And it's a very beautiful object up here in the
yes, I know. I think probably we all know it. Yes.
Yeah, Presses Stone. Yes.
Yes, Brecon is really that cathedral is an extraordinary thing to have in such a small town, isn't it? So we're very lucky to have that here on our hill.
I actually found when I moved from Brecon, when I was living in Brecon for 17 years, although the countryside is beautiful, I was never inspired to paint it. Whereas in Aberdare, there's lots of nature, but it's quite gritty because there are signs of industrialisation everywhere. You know, in the hedges, the old cast iron gate post, the bits of rail, you know, there isn't anywhere entirely natural, and I find that actually more, it inspires me more because I've never liked things too perfect.
Yes, yeah.
So I do find it very different.
It's like when you drive over beyond Llangannada, over the mountain there, and you get up onto the top and you look back to the Brecon Beacons one way, and then you see the heads of the valleys.
Yes.
I always think that's an extraordinary.
With wind farms, probably.
Yes, and the Rigos Mountain is the same, isn't it?
Yes.
You can see the beacons one way, and then you see the industrial.
Yes, it's very different.
To the south.